Magic Rings and Laser Beams is a Grimaxe Studio production created by sci-fi and fantasy fans for sci-fi and fantasy fans. Your host is Ben Sherman, a scriptwriter and voice talent for Fare and History, a longtime gamer and reader, and has been writing fantasy literature for the past 10 years. He's also known by his very silly username, Poohead189. In this podcast, he interviews popular authors of the science fiction and fantasy genres and speaks on writing, gaming, and movies. You can support this podcast by going to patreon.com/poohead189. Welcome, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to the third episode of Magic Rings and Laser Beams. I hope you guys have been enjoying the other interviews that I've had in the past. I'm certain you're going to enjoy this interview. You know, a buddy of mine came into town recently. He goes to law school in Texas, or actually just graduated law school, but me and him often watch a lot of Star Wars movies together, and when he got to town, we kind of were thinking like, what Star Wars movie haven't we seen in a while? And I was thinking like, Revenge of the Sith. And he agreed, and we saw Revenge of the Sith, and God, like, I gotta say, the prequel movies, they do have quite a lot wrong with them, but I think they're a lot better than people often give them credit for. And honestly, I think the good outweighs the bad by quite a bit. Like, I mean, there's obvious small little things that are littered throughout the movie that are just like, It's easier to see the prequel movies as like, you might want to see the Silmarillion in a way from Lord of the Rings. Is sort of like, it's more like a history kind of thing than an actual, like hero's journey. Because it just details what happens and why. And don't get me wrong, it's in a very entertaining fashion, and there are characters in it that you absolutely love, like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn and Yoda and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's just, it's almost like a very interesting sort of documentary, more than anything. Even if it like betrays itself as a movie, like or as movies, part of the way through, or part of it is still kind of like, seems almost historical, like a long cut scene in a KOTOR game or something along those lines. But I will say something about Revenge of the Sith. Apparently it got a lot of really good reviews, and I think it deserves it. But according to critics, it was the second highest rated Star Wars movie ever, at least before the prequels came out. And I don't even want to look at what the critics say about that. But, Revenge of the Sith, I agree, it's probably the second best Star Wars movie. Maybe it's actually the best, who knows? But, everyone will say Empire Strikes Back is probably the best Star Wars movie made. And I gotta say, I absolutely love Episode 1, just because, I think because it has all the best characters in it. It has Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Darth Maul. And, and none of the other movies have all three of them together. They just have Obi-Wan, which, Obi-Wan's great, though. Gotta be honest. Sorry, let me get back to Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith, while it has, problems littered through it, it has so many great things in it. And I will say one of the really good things is foreshadowing. It does foreshadowing incredibly well. And, symbolic scenes, like, how do I put it? Remember when Obi-Wan's about to go fight General Grievous, and he's leaving Anakin behind, and it's their last meeting as friends before they become enemies. and Obi-Wan and Anakin say, or Obi-Wan says, "Goodbye, old friend. May the Force be with you." And he says "goodbye, old friend" as if he'll never see him again. And in a way, he doesn't. He doesn't see Anakin again. The next time they see each other, they're not friends anymore. Anakin is Darth Vader, and they're having to fight to the death. But it's, so they don't see each other again until they're both literally Force ghosts. So it's, little things like that. It's a very well constructed movie. And of course the lightsaber battles are incredible, which is something that the prequels will always have over every other Star Wars movie, originals or sequels. The prequels have the most incredible lightsaber combat ever. I hear that people always expected something, but really good about Revenge of the Sith is people expected, that the fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin was kind of sped up and made with CGI and stuff like that, but actually all of it was real time, and all of it was from months of practicing the same sequences over and over with Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen. And apparently, the cast and film crew, once they finished it, their final take, they got a standing ovation and an applause that wasn't warranted. No one asked for them to do that. But everyone just could not believe how fast they had been fighting and how much they'd practiced to get these incredible acrobatic and lightsaber sequences done. And it, when you see that fight, that's probably the best fight in the entire series. Maybe Darth Maul versus Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon is better. Maybe. Obviously, anything with Yoda in it is really good. But just, those seem to be the best fights. Although I will say, Count Dooku versus Yoda is also very good. Every prequel fight is really good. Let's be honest here, though. But yeah, it's, I see it again after not seeing it for a few years, and it's just so well made. Even if, it has some kind of cringy romantic moments and some weird lines and sort of, I think the CGI and the background is really well done. But of course, there are certain instances where you're like, well, of course that's fake. But it's just, I don't know. Even parts of it that's bad, it's kind of the funny bad where, you enjoy it. So when you gloss over it to get to the real huge parts, you're like, oh my God, this is an enjoyable film. So, I love Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith is really fucking good. But let's continue on to something that I've been doing, and I've literally just started. In fact, it was tonight that I'm recording this, at least, that I've seen the first 2 episodes of the Frankenstein Chronicles with Sean Bean. And that's really freaking good. It's very dark, very gritty. Well, maybe it's not very gritty. It's more, how do I put it? Definitely dark. Sort of like it's not like a Warhammer Fantasy thing, but it's almost like a Warhammer 40k Hive world kind of thing set in the 1800s, if that's possible at all. It has a lot of not pseudoscience, but I suppose pseudoscience is a part of it, but it follows a detective, Sean Bean's character, trying to look for who is carving up these small children, cutting up their limbs and body parts, and then sewing them back together to each other. As in, in episode 1, he finds the body of a child that actually isn't the body of a child. It's actually a bunch of children sewn together to create a child's body with 2 legs, 2 arms, a torso, and a girl's head. So all of those body parts are not supposed to be attached. They're supposed to be on other children. But someone did it and made that, and it shoved it down a river. And when they found it, it was, and the hook to the episode is that when he finds it, and it's just the first 10 minutes, so it's not like it's a spoiler. When he finds it and he like sees like a hand sewed onto the arm, and he picks up the arm, and then the hand grabs at him. So it's a dead child that's not even ever been alive before, because it's not really a full child, and it grabs at him. And, you know, it doesn't do anything else, though. It's just like, it's almost kind of muscle memory, but it shouldn't do that. So, you know, and, you know, there's a lot of politics in it, too, about what surgeons should do, and is it an affront to God? And it's not the sort of like, oh, religion is stupid, and this is, you know, like, this is science that's overcoming it sort of thing. It's more of a, you know, the surgeons are pushing for an agenda that wants every body, and by body I mean dead body, so every corpse that is, you know, been every corpse of a of a poor person that is put in a graveyard should actually be sent to their labs so they can be studied. So it's making like a mandatory, you know, sort of body disposal to them, and the only people who can get past that law are rich people who can pay their way out of there, or, you know, nobility who, you know, or like or princes and the king's son, you know, they don't need to do that, but everyone else who cannot afford to get out of this act will mandatorily give their body over to science. And, you know, that seems like a huge influx. And, you know, and the people there also believe that, you know, if their body isn't in the ground, then they will not be resurrected on Resurrection Day, you know, when Jesus comes back. And so there's this big theological debate, there's this big scientific debate, there's a big class debate. And so it's like, you know, like pretty much the article against it is the argument. God, it's just late. I'm sorry. The argument against it is, why are like these poor people, or these people that can't afford to not do that, now their bodies after they die are being treated like common criminal bodies, you know, because that used to be a sentence for just the criminals. And now if this law passes, it's going to be a sentence for everybody who is, you know, for everybody who can't pay their way out of there. Their bodies will have to be given to surgeons to be experimented upon. And it, you know, and people obviously have a problem with that. And I gotta say, I do recommend the show. I mean, it's only 12 episodes too, even though each episode is about 45 minutes, considering I don't, you know, watch commercials, so it'd be an hour on television. So yeah, it's pretty much a Game of Thrones length episode, and it's just 12 of them, and it's like 6 episodes a season, I think. And like I said, I'm only on episode 2 or 3 now, so, you know, I haven't seen a lot of it, but it's pretty friggin' good. Very creepy, very dark, very gloomy, but at the same time, you know, I like that kind of shit, and Sean Bean is a really good actor, and I've always enjoyed everything he's in. Alright, now let's talk about something that I really want to talk about, which is Greedfall. It's a really neat new game. I'm certain you've heard of it, but if you haven't, it's an indie game made by a French developer, and it's an RPG that is about your character, which is the nephew of the king of a fictional nation, going over to this island that has been recently discovered, and it's sort of like a land grab kind of thing from this continent, this pseudo-European continent. And so it's your nation and then 2 other nations, a northern nation that's sort of like a magocracy, and the southern nation that's a bunch of allied city-states, and they're all trying to go overseas to this newly discovered island, almost like a colonial America kind of thing, even though it's not like a huge continent like America is. It's just a large island. Probably like, I haven't seen like any size comparison. It's probably smaller than Australia, so, you know. But they need to go. They all go over there, and they're looking for, obviously, economic opportunities and various things like that. But there's also a deadly disease on the continent, this pseudo-European continent, and people are theorizing that the cure is over on the island. So if they can bring the cure back, then that would be, great for them. But you are the nephew of the king, and you've gone over there with an expedition, and your cousin, the new governor of the island, or of your colony on the island, and you're going over there to explore. And there are natives on the island, and although they're odd. They're not like what I expected Native Americans, but no, they're very white and freckled. They almost look like, they almost have like those little decorations like the trolls in Witcher 2 have. I think the game I would say is a cross between Witcher 2, Dragon Age 2, and friggin' what was the other game I was thinking of? Dark Souls. So it has a lot of the similar gameplay to Witcher 2, and a fair amount of similar gameplay and companion-based stuff as Dragon Age 2, and it just has a Dark Souls feel and look, except it's sort of 18th century, 17th century technology. So, but it's really neat. I like it quite a bit, and if you would like to watch some stuff on it, then I have been playing it on Twitch. And don't worry, I'm not someone who's be like, hey, check me out on Twitch so I don't have to do anything else for any other this kind of shit. But this is actually the first time I've used Twitch in 3 years, and I only played 2 games I've only played twice on Twitch before that, and I only played once on Greedfall a few days ago. But by the time this comes out, I will probably be playing more regularly. So if you'd like to watch, me play Greedfall, you can check it out on my Twitch channel. No big deal. Don't feel obligated about that at all. And now for the Writer's Workshop, or, for role players as well. Today we're going to be talking about thieves and a thief mentality. A lot of people, mostly people who've never stolen anything before, don't really know what goes into the mind of a thief or why they do what they do. And, after doing some research on that, and, before I talk about my research, I remember when I was a very small kid, I remember the one and only time I ever stole anything. I was in a mall, and I was like 4 or 5 years old. I was probably 5 years old. No, I was probably even younger, actually. And I went to this candy shop with my dad. And I remember when I thought my dad wasn't looking, and I reached into this little like cupboard that, where you can like put a ladle in and take out a bunch of candy and like put it in this little baggie, and they weigh it, and and they're like, oh, this costs this much. I reached into one of those things with the M&Ms, and I grabbed a handful and just shoved it in my mouth because I thought that my dad wasn't looking. And I remember what went through my mind then. And, my dad caught me, and he's like, now we don't do that, okay? We don't do that. And I forgot if he talked to the guy or not. I remember I felt so guilty about it after my dad caught me that I didn't do it again. But I remember what went through my mind then, and I thought, like, this place is so big, so pristine, this mall is so nice, they can afford me taking 10 M&Ms. And that was it. And I realized it was just a child's thoughts. But I later found out through research that is actually what a lot of thieves actually think. They don't really think ahead. They don't really think, what am I doing? Or if they do, it's usually not during the fact. But they just want to, like, they realize that other people have more than they do. And they don't feel like life has rules. Or at least life that has, like, materialistic rules that you really should follow that's worth you not eating, or that's worth you not living comfortably. And like, a lot of thieves don't want to like rule the world. They don't want to don't want to be the richest guy on earth. They're not actual money grubbers. They take what other people don't need, or what the thief thinks that they don't need. They take it and they think, you know what, I will put this to better use. And they obviously will, and it's a matter of pride on why that this person doesn't want me to take their shit. You know what I mean? And, like, I saw an hour-long talk by Frank Abagnale. And, for those who don't recognize the name, Frank Abagnale is that very famous con artist and thief that was portrayed by Leonardo DiCaprio in Catch Me If You Can. Him and Tom Hanks playing a wonderful role, and it was a wonderful roles, and it was made by Steven Spielberg. And if you haven't seen the movie, you really should, because it's very good. But Leo played, as I said, Frank Abagnale, and essentially what he did was he had a few brothers and sisters and a loving family, but one day his parents had been planning on getting a divorce for a while. He didn't know that. And one day he was taken from school and brought to a courtroom house. Or a courthouse, into a courtroom, and his parents were standing there with the judge. And the judge said, your parents are getting a divorce. You need to choose which one of them you're going to live with. And he was 16 years old. And he cried, and he ran out of the room. And the judge says, we'll take a 10-minute recess. And his parents went after him, but Frank didn't stop running. Frank was told to choose between his two parents. And what he did was he left, went to his parents' place, or his house, took some of his belongings, and then just kept running because he didn't want to deal with this. He got a small job somewhere, but it didn't pay them nearly enough because he was just 16 years old. So he lied about his age. He got another job, paid him a little bit more because he said he was 26. And I think he also forged the credit card, or not the credit card. I'm really speaking weirdly tonight. He forged the card, like his ID, and I think it was easier to forge back then than now. Or at least it was easier to hand forge back then than now. And, he got paid a little bit more, but it still wasn't enough. And so then he lied. He saw that there were these airline pilots leaving this hotel, and he was like, hey, I'm certain that I can get paid a lot being an airline pilot, but I don't have the money to go to school for it. So I'm going to take a uniform, or I'm going to get a uniform made for me, and then I'm going to get a card made for me, and then I'm going to pose as a pilot, as a co-pilot. And then I'm going to be given government checks, or checks from the airline, and I'm going to travel all over the world wherever I need to go so I can run away as much as I can. And I'm going to get paid doing it. And he did that. And he did that for years. And he doesn't think he's gifted or a genius, but I think he is, because he evaded the FBI for 6 years. And from age 16 to 23. So he spent 7 years running from the FBI. And successfully. And living off of checks. Lying to banks. Lying to the airline. And just, and becoming an international criminal. And he did all of this just because he felt like that's what he needed to do. Of course, he had a roguishness to him. It's not like, it's just like, oh, it's a 9-to-5 job. I'm gonna, Just lie about this, lie about that, lie about that, and then I'm gonna, just go home to the wife. Like he didn't think that way, but he also didn't really think ahead, or he didn't think too much in the moral part about it. He just did it. It's sort of like, I need to do this for this. It's just a lie. It's just a suit that they, it's just cloth. Like, who's gonna miss this? It's just an ID badge. Like, what are these regulations anyway? And, this check bounced. Who cares? The bank has like more money than I can ever spend. I'm just going to falsify this check, and then I'm just going to get paid by the airline, and the checks are not going to, it won't matter. I'm going to get the money anyway. And, he did that for that long, and he just lived that life. And it's like doing drugs. It's like drinking alcohol. It's like any vice. You do it, and even if you know that it's technically wrong, you're going to keep doing it because it's a part of your life. So, if you write a thief or you write a rogue, you don't need to make them conniving. You can, of course. Some people thieve because, they want people to not have as much, and they want to take that shit, and they realize it's wrong, and they're like, yeah, fuck you. They do that. But a lot of the times the thief is just kind of like they know it's like they realize that it's not seen as right, but they're, like, why not? Why not do this? Or at least, like, I need to do this. There's a lot of things, but you don't need to think really far outside the box to create a thief. You don't need to have some huge plan or some huge underlying motivation that creates this diabolical thief. Like Aladdin, my favorite Disney movie. Aladdin steals because he needs to. And he might have quirky fun doing it, but, that doesn't mean that he enjoys stealing. That just means that he does it and that he makes the best of what he does. Although, of course, it is very neat to write a thief that actually enjoys stealing, like he enjoys being sort of roguish and scandalous, which is, that's very fun to do, but you don't need to do that, is the point. All right, guys, I hope you found that informative. And now we're going to go to my interview with R. Lee Byers, or Richard Lee Byers, and I hope you enjoy it because I know I did. All right. I'm very happy to have you on the podcast. Truth be told, I've been a fan of your writing style for a while, but I wasn't exposed to a lot of your work for many years. I read Disillusion twice, and for people who do not know, Disillusion is the first book in the War of the Spider-Queen series, The Forgotten Realms. But ever since Disillusion, I've been wanting to check out more of your work, and this podcast gave me the opportunity to grab a few books of yours. So before we start in earnest, would you please introduce yourself to the listeners in case they weren't familiar with your work?
Yeah, I'm Richard Lee Byers. I write fantasy and horror mainly, also some superhero stuff and material in other genres from time to time. I'm probably best known for my Forgotten Realms stuff.
All right, then. How did you get into writing, and when did you start?
I started in the kind of middle 80s. I had always had a yen to be a writer, but I had listened to all the people that told me that you needed a real job, so to speak, because you probably wouldn't make a living in writing, which is true. And I went into psychology and ended up working in a psychiatric facility, and I found the work so draining that when I came home I didn't write anything. That went on for years on end, and I kind of got burned out on the whole mental health system thing. So when my mom passed away, she left me some money, and I thought, well, if I'm ever going to write, this is it. I need to either take the plunge now or accept the fact that it's never going to happen. So I decided to take the plunge. I left the job and had money from my mom to live on for a while, and I started writing, and I think maybe the following year I sold a little short piece to a small press magazine, and things kind of went on from there.
Oh wow, okay then. That sounds like there was this other famous author I think 100 years ago or something. I don't think it was like Ralph Waldo Emerson, but someone gave someone else like a year's worth of money and they just started writing because they knew they'd be great and they just kept going. That's really neat
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. Well, it kind of makes me like a privileged bastard, in the eyes of the many people who are trying to do it, and working hard at it, who don't have that advantage. But I did, and it was fortunate for me.
I'm doing the same thing right now, but honestly, if I had that opportunity, I'd take it. But let's see. I know you're known for your horror writing, but I've never actually read any of your horror novels. Next time you come on the podcast, we'll speak a lot on your Realms work, and I know you wrote Realms of the Dead. Um, why do you enjoy writing horror?
Well, a couple reasons, I think. One is that it, there's an intensity to it.
Right.
That it's really trying to make the reader feel something. And a lot of fiction, I think, is more kind of, I don't know if mild is the right word, but a lot of fiction I don't think is as committed to doing that. And for us, I like the intensity. I also like the fact that you really don't know how a horror story is going to come out. If you read if you read a fantasy novel like, say, Lord of the Rings or whatever, you in general know that things are going to be okay.
Hmm.
And if you read a detective novel, you pretty much know that yeah, the detective's going to unmask the murderer, and I mean, there's a degree of variation in there, but
But they'll solve the case.
but I mean, there's just the range of possibility that there is in horror, where like you really don't know if things going to come out okay, or if the monster's going to win, or whatever.
Are you a discovery writer, or do you already understand? Like, do you know how it's going to turn out before you start writing?
Um, Generally, yes, in broad terms.
Okay.
I don't necessarily know everything that's going to happen along the way, but I kind of know where I'm headed and what are going to be a couple of the big dramatic points along the way. That's with a novel. With a short story, or I pretty much kind of have it all in my head before I start.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and there's another thing too, which is that once you start selling on proposal, then a lot of times that process involves having created an outline for the novel. And I mean, once I've plotted the whole thing, well, there it is. I'm not.
Right.
There's some people who will deviate wildly from their outlines, but I've never done that. I guess I'm too lazy. Plotting it once is enough.
Let's talk a little bit about the War of the Spider Queen. How did it begin? Because I know it's got a bunch of authors in it, and how were you chosen to write the first book as well?
Well, at that time, people at Wizards of the Coast had it in their head that they wanted to try to boost of their certain of their other writers that they saw potential in kind of higher up in higher up in the reader's consciousness. Get more Realms fans to pick up those books, and they thought, well, everybody is buying R.A. Salvatore already.
Right.
So let's do R.A. Salvatore's War of the Spider Queen, and these 6 writers that we think have potential will each do one book. So I was one of those guys, and they contacted me and said, "Do you want to do it?" And I said, "Sure." And things went on from there. Now, how I got picked to do the first one, I have no idea. I can tell you it was kind of I feel in retrospect it was kind of the privileged position, because I had to everybody who came after me had to had to, work with everything that had been done before, even if they didn't like it particularly,
Yeah.
or keep track of everything that had gone before. Going first, I didn't have that problem.
Right. Gotcha. Let's see. Did you, since you wrote the first book, how did they create the characters? Did you have like a major part in that since began it?
Well, I think that in a lot of cases, I did. We had a big meeting out at the Wizards of the Coast office. Those of us who were already involved in the projects, which was not all 6 of the writers yet.
Yeah.
I think the guys that were doing the first 3 books were there, and Bob was there, and people from editorial were there, and we plotted the series in very broad strokes. And the broad strokes included who the characters were going to be in Dissolution, but it was stuff like, this guy is going to be a teacher from Sorcerer, and this guy is going to be a master of arms from Melee Magther. So so I felt like that really I did create the characters because I filled in everything beyond that.
Oh, okay.
And for the most part, now I do give credit. There's a character in there who's this kind of a scout, and
he shows up in the second book, I think.
yeah, well, he's in my first book, but he's there very
briefly.
He's there very kind of briefly and peripherally, and I didn't do a lot to flesh him out. So in that case, I give all credit to the writer that came along later that did work with him, because basically I just, they said, he's going to be a scout, and about all my book says about him is, yeah, he's a scout. So I don't deserve a lot of credit for that. And the priestess character was actually a pre-existing character from Bob's books. So,
oh yeah, Quinthel.
Yeah, so
I
I can't say I created her either.
No.
Oh, although she was an interesting character. I remember that at the time that we were plotting out the series, Quinthel was, Bob was pushing for Quinthel, and I was pushing for a new character, basically just because, I wanted to kind of do my own thing. It seemed meaningful at that particular point in time, but I was overruled, and we had be Quinthel. And it turned out subsequently, when people started writing in, that Bob had forgotten that Quinthel was dead. he had killed her off in one of his groups.
I remember that, actually. Yeah, that confused me at first.
And ultimately, Elaine Cunningham in some of her Dark Elf books explained how Quinthel had been resurrected and patched that hole in the continuity. My solution was I wanted to say at some point that the character that Bob had killed was Quinthel Lou Banray, and that my character, the character in Dissolution in the following books, was Quinthel Sue Banray, her twin sister. But I guess editorial didn't think that would fly.
I do, yeah. I wasn't even planning on asking about that, but that shows me okay, because I had a lot of questions about that when I was younger, when I was reading through Bob's work, and then I saw her again in War of the Spider Queen. I'm like, that's strange.
Yeah, well, if you read Elaine's Dark Elf books, you'll find out how she's resurrected. Because so we did plug that hole.
Gotcha. Let's see. Before I start talking about the characters, I know this is how you say this is Rild, but how do you say, is it? I always called it, like, just because of the universe, I always called him Faerun, but I know it's not it. Faerun, or
Well, I always say Faerun.
Faerun.
Faerun. I think that's how I've heard Ed Greenwood say it.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting though. When you work with these made up names that pertain to these shared worlds.
Mm-hmm.
What I think some people don't know is that is that the writers maybe get a list of names that they can crib from and kind of shift around and stuff like that, and then pre-existing names. But it's in print. We don't necessarily know ourselves how they're pronounced, or at least I don't always.
Right.
I come up with a pronunciation in my head, and if somebody asks me, "Why do you say that?" I'll say, "Well, I say it like this, but I don't know how Ed Greenwood would say it."
Right.
And
All right,
this is the ultimate Forgotten Realms authority.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. I think you clearly had a lot of fun writing Farron in particular, because you write in a very elaborate but clever fashion, and he sort of fits that to a T. Did you enjoy like making Kim be sort of the like extremely like roguish sorcerer, while Rild was sort of the straight man in sort of a? I mean, it's definitely not a comedy duo, but
Yeah, well, it kind of one of the tricky things I thought about writing that it seemed to me about writing Dissolution was that a lot of fantasy books are with multiple sentient races can kind of be constructed along the kind of a Chinese menu thing, you know?
right.
Or, where, okay, it's like, well, here's Legolas. He's a typical elf, right? And here's Gimli, and he's a typical dwarf. And you can get away with that stuff, and depending on the kind of story you're writing, because, you really just kind of got one of them in a major role. But with Dissolution, like, every character was going to be a dark elf. And I had to, and dark elves all share certain characteristics. So I had, they're all devious and amoral and all that kind of stuff. Right. So I had to, so writing a book that had nothing but dark elves, I had to find a way to differentiate them from one another, even though they all had these common characteristics. And it was kind of tricky, but I think that with Farron, I did pretty well. A lot of people seem to remember him.
Yes.
I did everything I could to give him some interesting characteristics that did not take him away from the dark elf thing.
And Rild was very...
Because the realms already had Drizzt, you weren't gonna. I wasn't gonna do another good
right. But Rild was also like, you could definitely tell it was a dark elf, but he also kind of went against the grain for a fair amount of dark elf characteristics, at least when it comes to well, I suppose that's actually not true, because he didn't really trust anybody, but he did trust Farron.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of, to me, that was kind of a pivotal moment in the book, because I thought Farron was, more than any other character, the protagonist.
Right.
And I wanted to, definitely kind of nail down his dark elfness, despite the fact that he was not a typical dark elf in a lot of ways. So there's a moment that comes later in the book, and I don't guess we're spoiling anything too horribly this many years later. But there's a moment where he basically just turns his back on Rild and leaves him to die.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of my favorite moments of the book, because I felt like that was where I was true to what dark elves are supposed to be, even with my main guy.
Let's see, did they give you sort of an, like, did you create the outline for the book, and then they were sort of like, sure, we'll do this? Or, because I know that they knew everything that would happen in broad strokes, but like,
well, what happened? Yeah, what happened was that we'd had the whole 6-book series laid out in very, very broad strokes, but the outline included where each book was supposed to end, so the next writer would know where to pick up. Because of the timetable, every people that came after me were looking, in most cases, or in many cases, at outlines rather than completed novels. You could be writing book 4 and you just have the outline of book 3.
Right.
So, so they had, so like I said, we had the outlines that said where they'd end up, and basically the outline for the master outline for the series said that my book ended up with everybody important knowing what the problem was, Lolth has gone silent, and we're going to get this expedition, off to try to figure out what's what. And my problem with that was that I thought that that's at most that's like 10,000 words. That's not a novel.
Right.
So I had to come up with enough incident to try to make my book interesting and still have it end at that really kind of very early starting point for the overall series, so that I've got a big attack on Menzoberranzan, and the stone buildings are on fire because of magic and all that. And I was all that was there because I wanted to make my book cool, even though, like I said, it doesn't. In terms of, if you really look at the overall story of War of the Spider Queen, it doesn't get you very far down the road.
No. Did you create the whole Gromp wants to kill Quinthel plot at the beginning?
Oh God, did I create that? I don't remember anymore.
Well, it didn't last too long.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think I might have. I mean, you have to give every character some kind of problem, to make what they go through interesting. I might have made that up, but I can't swear to it.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
It did like set a few things in motion, but at the same time, it didn't last. I think it was like 40 pages in all in a 300-page book.
Okay, well, and it's not picked up in any of the later books.
Not particularly, no.
Well, I probably made it up then.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about your small short story, even though that's probably pretty hard to recall since it's a novella in I think the book that was going to kick off Richard Baker's last Mythol series. I spoke to him last interview, and what your novella was called Traitors,
right?
And,
I think it tied into Your Rogue Dragons, right?
That's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask if you wrote it before your Rage of Dragons novels, or if you were using that as a springboard, or if you just decided to, like, hey, I have these Rage of Dragons novels, let's add this short story to the Realms of the Elves.
I don't know if I had written all of Your Rogue Dragons, all the books, at that point, but I was already working on the series.
Gotcha. Okay.
If I hadn't finished the series, I was working on the series.
That makes sense. Did you? Let's see, because I think by that point it was, I think 3rd edition for Dungeons and Dragons, and I don't know. I know that they had quite a bit of the background of the realms created by that point.
Yeah, there's a ton of 2nd edition stuff.
Oh yeah, that's very true. But I had no idea gold dragons. It's interesting that you chose to make a gold dragon sort of be the, I wouldn't say antagonist, but sort of the overbearing lord, because, gold dragons in modern Forgotten Realms, or even, and by modern, I don't even mean like 5th edition, I mean modern as in like not, in the vast background, of the days of yore and the setting, they're like very paladin-like. So why would you choose a gold dragon to make him sort of that overbearing and arrogant, even though,
Well, I think that dragon characters are like human characters in that they can, they can have individual variation.
True.
They don't have to be perfect. I mean, I think my gold dragon character was adhering to the principles of lawful good as he understood them.
Right.
But a dragon is going to is often, I think, going to assume that he knows better and sees farther than these lesser creatures.
True.
How kindly disposed he might be to them on a certain level, it's like the best way to take care of them is to rule them and make sure they don't do stupid stuff.
Yeah. And he could be lawful good, especially if he's the one who's ruling.
Right.
Like what he says is the law.
Exactly.
So that does make quite a lot of sense. Let's see. Did they I wonder what year that was released. I think it was 2004 or something like that. Oh, why did you choose to go all the way back then to when dragons ruled? Was it just because you wanted to make a small little backstory on how it all happened, or?
I'm trying to remember if it was 100% my idea, or if somebody said, "Why don't you tie into Year of Rogue Dragons?"
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't recall. I do think that it enhances the overall story that I did that bit. That I went back and did show what things were like back then. Since in Year of Rogue Dragons, we're ultimately going to get to the ancient citadel and get to the bottom of the Red Star and all that stuff.
Okay, gotcha. Now I haven't read those. I've read about them, but no spoilers for me at least, because I want to really get into them. Let's see. Let's talk about some of your newer work.
Okay.
Could you tell me a bit about the Iron Kingdoms books that you've written?
Yeah, I did. I did. Let's see, one novella, which is the first story, and then two Iron Kingdom novels, which are about a kind of ragtag group of characters who get together and found a mercenary company. And at the start, since there's just a few of them, they're not. They're not being sent off to, go win this war, kind of thing, but they're being hired for policing actions and kind of espionage, all kind of an espionage type action, and
Okay.
they're characters that existed as well, for the most part, they're characters that existed as already in the gaming material. Like, if you picked up a certain module, you can say, well, here are these pre-generated characters you can run, right?
Right.
And I fleshed them out into characters that would work in fiction and be interesting in fiction, or at least I hope they're interesting.
Okay. How did who created Iron Kingdoms, the game?
Oh, God, what's the company? I don't know an individual. I'm trying to think of the name of the company. Hang on a second. I got one sitting here by my desk.
No problem.
Let's see. Terrible memory, right? When you get older. Let's see.
That's all right.
All right, what page is this on? Oh, Privateer Press. There we go.
Oh yeah.
I should have remembered that.
I mean, I kind of should have too, because I don't know, I haven't read any of the novels, but like I've thumbed through the source books, so.
Right. It's an interesting world.
Yeah. Okay. Huh. I didn't.
I hope that someday they might bring me back to do more about those characters. I'd like to, but they kind of wound down their fiction program at a certain point. The familiar phenomena for those of us who write gaming-based novels.
True.
I'm waiting to get an email someday, maybe.
Do you know why the Forgotten Realms stopped publishing books?
I assume. Well, the short answer is no, I don't, because I'm I'm just a freelancer. I'm not inside the company.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be because the sales just weren't there, but I don't think that's true, because I did I was in another big 6-book thing by 6 different authors that was supposed to kind of redeem the realms after they did the Spell Plague and the 100-Year Time Jump, and people didn't like it very much. All the changes that we made so I was involved in the series that was supposed to kind of put it back, and
the Sundering series.
yeah, the Sundering, and those books sold,
Huh.
and people seem to like him, seem to think we'd accomplished our objective. And I had all kind of plans that I was going forward, that I was going to go forward, and I was going to write this book and that book, and they were all on board with it until they weren't. And I had to kind of intuit by degrees that things weren't happening. And
Right.
I was probably one of the last people to understand that the fiction line had essentially been shut down. I feel like the last few books, or at least the last few books that the Sundering books did sell. So I don't know. I think maybe, and this is pure guesswork on my part because I don't know anything about anything, is that Wizards of the Coast is owned by Hasbro.
Yes.
And I think maybe somebody up in Hasbro looked at it and said, wait a minute, we're a toy company, we're not a book publishing company. These books might make some money, but they don't make as much money as our gaming stuff and our toy stuff makes. So why are we fooling with them? And so that's just 100% guesswork for me.
Speculation, right? Okay. I just wanted to, because I forgot to ask Richard Baker, and I didn't know if that was something I should even ask or not. But
he might know, but I don't know.
Right, gotcha.
I should say that Realms Fiction is not altogether gone because
Bob
Salvatore is still doing Driz books. So people who still want to read Realms Fiction can go get those. And who knows? Maybe there'll be a better day someday, and some of the rest of us will wind up doing Realms Fiction again too. I don't know.
I sure hope so, because those are some of my favorite lines of books.
Yeah, it's another thing where it's like all I can do is wait for the email, which hasn't turned up yet.
Gotcha. How long have you been writing for Cathal Entertainment?
Oh, that just started.
Really?
I think that Cathal Entertainment is just. I think they're just kind of branching out into having it be other writers in the house, as opposed to it only being Phil McCall, publishing his own stuff.
Okay.
I could be wrong about that, but I'm not aware of any other Cathal books other than Phil's up until mine. I think gonna be others. I mean, I think he has some very ambitious plans, but I'm not aware of others yet. If there are other Cathal authors out there who have books and are listening to this, please don't hate me. It's honest ignorance.
Did you create the because I'm not too familiar with Cathal Entertainment. Did you create the universe for the Citadel of Gold book?
No, that's another shared world. It's the world of the Shadow Sea game.
Yes.
It's a really cool miniatures game, and I've now done basically the first novel based on the Shadow Sea world, and I'll have at least two more books that will conclude the story I started in Citadel of Gold, and there's an anthology coming that I'll have a short story in, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if there are other novels coming from other people, but I haven't heard any of the details about that.
Okay. Now, the Citadel of Gold was a very quick book. It was, it's far longer than a novella, but it's about 190 pages.
Yeah,
and,
short.
Yeah, you get to the action very quickly, I think by page 15.
Yeah.
Did they want you to switch styles, or did they have a sort of plan for you to write in a certain font, or was it just sort of like, do what you want? Because it's just different from your Realms work.
Yeah, well, I wrote, I had a target length.
Okay.
Which they wanted a short book, so I wanted it. So it's a short, fast, action-packed kind of book. It's easy for me to kind of write that stuff because when I grew up decades and decades ago and was reading science fiction and fantasy, you didn't have these big long books like you've got now.
Right.
Books tended to be much shorter, so and I assimilated that, and I can write one like that. And I was also trying to kind of write a Edgar Rice Burroughs style novel.
Okay.
Because he was my idol when I was a kid. I thought Edgar Rice Burroughs was the greatest writer who ever lived. I wouldn't put it, quite that high now, but
Right.
I still think there's some very interesting things about his work, and I was trying to write a book that was kind of a love letter to him on a certain level. It's like I'm gonna try to do all the things in this book that made me like Edgar Rice Burroughs when I was a kid. So I think that contributes to the fast pace and the action.
Okay, that makes sense. Because it's sort of like, or it reminded me of sort of like an action movie where it's just like, hey, who are you? I'm this. And then, all right, let's get going to the adventure,
Yeah.
Very quick, but believable at least.
Yeah, well, I wanted to, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. There's a very successful writer, and I'm blanking on his name. I think it might be blanking on who it is. I think it might have been Elmore Leonard, but he said he tries to leave out the parts that people skip. I think that's good advice for certainly somebody that's trying to write an adventure story or a thriller.
Right.
Try to get to the cool stuff.
That definitely makes sense. Did you, because in the underworld, in the book, did it seemed like an extremely elaborate setting? Did you have any liberties when you were making that, or did they have like all the miniatures ready? Here you are,
Well, I mean, they gave me all the reference material that we have these monsters and this kind of terrain and stuff like that. So just like if you write a Forgotten Realms book, there's a lot of
Right.
that back world building that's already been done that you can just pull on. Now, I did add some things. One thing was an extrapolation from their world building, which is about kind of the way things are lit in the underground world while you're able to see.
Yes.
And it has to do with this constant kind of flickering lightning and all these glowing crystals and stuff. And I kind of thought, well, that would really mess with your normal waking and sleep cycle till you got used to it.
Yeah, the soldiers did. I remember that the soldiers did have when they first got there, they had a very hard time like sleeping or moving around, and I think one got lost. And
right, so I came up with that, and they came the lost city that they're going to, which is where they're hoping to find the object of their quest. I basically just pull that out. That doesn't really correspond to any of their pre-existing monsters or civilizations or anything. But it's cool because there's supposed to be a lot down there that's still mysterious, so it's not a big deal to add something.
True.
Yeah. Also, they had the world of the underworld is really well developed in their material to date. The surface world is not as developed. So I came up, because as for terms of the miniature game, it's all happening in the underworld, right? You fight the monsters or the opposing force or whatever in the underworld. So, but for a series of novels, I thought, well, we need to anchor this in the surface world. There has to be things going on there which influence why these guys came to the underworld and what happens there. So I kind of came up with the whole thing about the Principality of the Lowlands is in revolution against the Cordoban Kingdom, and which is kind of really loosely based on the Dutch War of Independence against Spain, and you'll I hope it's not giving too much away, but before the series ends, you'll see some more stuff that's happening on the surface world. and filling that out a little bit more, because I really think that you can't have this world of explorers and treasure hunters underground without kind of acknowledging where they came from and why they are the way they are.
True. And the Oxybalin people kind of remind me of Dark Elves a bit, a little bit, because it's a very matriarchal society that sort of is very controlling, and or at least from the little that we saw of them.
Now that you mention it, there are correspondences there. I wasn't really even thinking about that when I was writing, but you're correct.
All right, then let's see. When can we expect the second book in the series?
I'm not sure exactly. I'm writing it. I'm writing it next year, and I would hope that. One thing about Cathalson is they can turn stuff around really fast when you turn it in. So I would hope maybe by the end of the summer of next year. I've got other stuff that's like slated into my schedule before then, though. But I think by the end of the summer.
What else are you writing before then?
Okay, well I do work for a series called Basil and Mobius.
I've heard of that, but I don't know too much about it.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Grey Mouser and Fafhrd meet Indiana Jones in the modern world. That would kind of be my elevator pitch for it. If I didn't create it, a guy named Ryan Schifrin out in Hollywood created it,
right?
And he's people might know him from his work in films. Like if anybody's seen an anthology film called Tales of Halloween, he wrote and directed one of the chapters in that.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, so you've got these two roguish characters, and it's in the modern world, but they're going around collecting all these artifacts, many of which are associated with legend or urban legend or whatever, and acquiring them for reasons that are explained in the story, and of course the things always turn out to be cursed or have some supernatural guardian, or there's some kind of crazy complication like that.
Right.
I've done a bunch of stuff for that and that series, and I have at least two more novelettes to write for that, and maybe more work. I don't know yet. And I have I'm doing a novel for Green Ronin based on the Mutants and Masterminds superhero game.
Oh yes, I do know about that.
And so I will. I think that I gotta do that before I do the next Shadowsea book. And
Right.
but I should be able to bang that stuff out fairly quickly, and then hopefully get on with it to do the Shadowsea book. This you kind of the ugly reality is that I have to prioritize stuff that's going to pay me more money right away.
Right.
I think the Shadowsea book the Shadowsea books have a lot of potential to generate a lot of revenue down the road, but other things are going to put more money in my pocket right now, and so those kind of get done first. But anyway, but still look for the second Shadowsea book by the end of next summer.
Okay, and plus they probably probably the books that you're writing right now are also have deadlines that are.
Yeah, everything's on a deadline pretty much.
Yeah.
The like the Basil and Mobius stuff, basically that's September.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Wow.
So I told the editor I would have it by the end of the That's and then I'll be done with that, unless it goes in such a way where he wants more, in which case he's one of my better paying markets. So I'll probably do, if he wants more, I'll probably do the more next. Yeah. And then, like I said, the Mutants and Masterminds novel, which I'm actually really looking forward to writing, because I've always been a comic book fan and like superheroes and stuff. And
Right.
my editor there is Jane Gates, and she's really a pleasure to work with. And I've really enjoyed all the stuff. I've already done some shorter Mutants and Mastermind stuff, and really enjoyed writing and really enjoyed working with her. So that's going to be fun.
That is
But
fortunate. I should check that out. Now, last question before we wrap up the interview. I was wondering, are you, because you just said you're a fan of comic books, are you a fan of any of the tabletop universes that have hired you? Like, do you play any of the games?
well, I played D&D.
Okay.
But I didn't play in the realms.
Oh, gotcha. Was
I
it Eberron?
played. I played. I wrote one Pathfinder novel back when they were doing novels, and I have played Pathfinder. I've run Pathfinder. I jammed. So that would be the one. I'm kind of a fan of. I'm kind of a fan of all of them in terms of the amount of creativity and everything that's gone into them. But I have very limited time to game.
That makes sense.
So picking up on a just in terms of a new system or whatever, is not necessarily easy. And most of these worlds actually come with a system.
Yes.
And right now, the game I'm running is the old superhero game Champions. Because I already knew how to do that, and I had an idea for a superhero campaign, so I just jumped on that. I could have done, I guess I could have done it in the context of Mutants and Masterminds, but then I would have had to actually learn Mutants and Masterminds rules,
Yeah.
which, and I already knew Champions, and it's interesting. One thing that people don't know about writing in the game world is that you don't actually have to understand how the game is played.
Right. You just need to know the lore, not the D20.
Yeah, you need to know the lore. I mean, you need to, like if you're writing a Realms book, you need to know that gold dragons breathe fire.
Yes.
You don't need to know how many hit dice they have and stuff like that. Yeah, or you don't need to know how armor class works or anything like that. There's a very, at least it's pretty clear to me. There's a very clear line between what is what you need to know to create convincing fiction in the world, and what is just the artifact of the game system.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to wrap it up, but I remembered something that I really wanted to ask you, because people who listen to this podcast know that I am a big Forgotten Realms fan, but I'm also a huge fan of Warhammer, and you did write a Black Library book.
Yes, I did.
Could you tell me a bit about what that is? Because it seemed like a book about witch hunters, but I've read a lot of Black Library books, but I haven't read that one.
Yeah, it's a book about it's a book about sorcery, basically.
Oh, okay, really?
It was interesting. I got the if you look at Black Library books, they always have they almost always have some big, fierce warrior branding an enormous weapon, and
Yes.
they just kind of scream, over the top gothic action, right?
Yes.
So my book came out, and it's the cover is like a still life of a book sitting on a desk.
That's true. Yeah, that's why I couldn't tell what it was.
I've never understood that, but anyway, I did do one, and I very much enjoyed writing it. I know that the whole Warhammer universe has moved on now, basically.
Unfortunately, yes.
These things are going to do. So if I ever were to go back and do another one, it would have to be, I'm sure, set in their new universe, and I'd have to learn all about that.
Mm-hmm. Or their science fiction one, 40K.
Yeah, they never, they didn't talk to me about doing that one. I see a lot of comments that make me think that's the more popular one than the medieval one. I don't know.
It's sort of, at least popular culture wise, but I think it's mostly just because, hey, look, Space Marines sort of thing.
I'd be happy to do another one. I enjoyed working in the Warhammer universe, but as the things went, I just did that one. And it's Possibly because it didn't sell that well, and I think it didn't sell that well because the cover was a damn still life of a book sitting at the desk. But I could be wrong. Maybe people just didn't like it.
I mean, that's what confused me about it, because I mean, it's called The Enemy Within, but I didn't really I didn't understand it, like, or at least, yeah, I haven't. I saw it online, but I haven't seen it in a bookstore. And if I saw it in a bookstore, I would have turned it around and read the synopsis. But
it's came out so many years ago. You're not going to see it in a new bookstore. I'm virtually positive of that.
Gotcha. Okay, and it was about sort of like the colleges of magic a bit.
Oh God, what is it about? It's.
You've written a lot of books, so I don't.
I remember it's about a guy. It's about a guy. It's about sorcery, and it's about a guy dealing with kind of the shadow self or possessing demon or something like that. I think. I remember I had fun writing it, but it's not one that where all the details are real clear in my memory. It's like, God, it's kind of been at least 15 years.
Yeah, I think it was the 2004 book. I think.
Did I get that right? Wow.
Yeah, yes, you did.
Okay. Boy, I nailed that.
Yeah.
It's too bad I can't remember what the damn thing's about, but I know when it came out.
I'll tell you what. Next time I'll read it and I'll talk to you about it. And
you tell me all about it.
yeah, I could tell you, like, hey, remember this part? And,
yeah,
okay.
I do remember some stuff I've written. I remember by Black River Regulars book and some my Mutants and Mastermind stuff, and
I mean, you remember quite a bit on your Forgotten Realms stuff. So.
My Forgotten Realms stuff. It's the stuff where I don't know. I think maybe the stuff where I only did one book or one story is a little harder.
Yeah, because I saw it. It was kind of stuck out on your list of works, because it was just like, and one Black Library book. I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I do remember my one Pathfinder book pretty well.
Was that more recent? Because I did see.
Yeah, that's more recent.
Okay.
So I'm not completely hopeless on all this stuff.
No, you're fine. All right, Richard. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, because it's been really fun talking.
Oh, well, thank you. I had a good time. I'm glad you invited me.
Oh, yeah, no problem. And I hope to invite you again next time if there is a season 2. I believe there will be, but that depends on Patreon members and stuff like that. So, hoping that happens.
Okay, sure. I'll be happy to come back.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. And, okay, everyone. This has been Magic Rings and Laser Beams. Have a good one.